topic on restrictive strabismus because my teacher, Dr. Kalpana Madam, she is due to personal reasons, she is not able to attend this conference this time. So I'll be talking about restrictive strabismus. So restrictive strabismus includes a gamut of conditions such as the Duane's retraction syndrome, the Brown syndrome, and all the other things. So basically here there is a mechanical restriction to the movements of the eye. So there is a mechanical restriction to the movements of the eye. So it should be differentiated from a paretic strabismus. Dr. Muralidhar has told about vertical strabismus where there is paretic components involved. So three things which can help in differentiating this from this thing is the saccadic velocity, and then the lid fissure changes, and third is most important is the force reduction test, which Dr. Deepti has very nicely demonstrated. So with this we can differentiate the restrictive from the paretic strabismus. So these are the different types of restrictive strabismus, like as I told, the Duane's, the Brown's, congenital fibrosis syndrome, the orbital floor fractures, and the thyroid ophthalmopathy. Coming to the most important, I'll be concentrating only on Duane's retraction syndrome. So basically, this is an innervational abnormality which happens probably during the 4 to 8 week of gestation. So there is either an injury or a maldevelopment of the abducens nucleus and the nerve itself. And because of that, the fibers from the oculomotor nerves, the third nerve, so the third nerve goes and innervates the lateral rectus muscle. So that is the reason why all these problems will start. We have to always remember that regardless of the type of Duane's, whether it's a type 1, type 2, type 3, it's always the lateral rectus muscle which is at fault. So we should always remember this point. It is always the lateral rectus muscle which is at fault in a Duane's retraction syndrome. So lateral rectus may have anomalous innervation, or it may have mixed anomalous and subnormal, or even a normal innervation. But it's always the fault in the lateral rectus which causes the problem. And we should remember that medial rectus is never at fault. It's always the lateral rectus. So I want to emphasize this point. That's why I'm repeatedly telling this one. Clinical features, basically Duane's retraction syndrome is characterized by a limitation of abduction. And when the patient is trying to abduct, there'll be a widening of the palpebral aperture. And when the patient is trying to adduct, there'll be narrowing of the palpebral aperture. So these are the classical Duane's retraction syndrome. You can see in this video, this patient is trying to, this is a different type 3 type of Duane's retraction syndrome where there is both restriction of the abduction as well as the adduction. So examination, I think Dr. Deepti has very nicely highlighted the steps of examination of a strabismus. But here in this particular Duane's retraction syndrome, I would like to emphasize one important thing is to look for the head posture and check for the fusion. So whether the head posture is because of the fusion, whether to have binocular vision, the patient is having the abnormal head posture. And we have to check for the ocular motility to know the anomalous lateral rectus neuromechanisms, because that will be important when you are planning for the surgery. Another important feature of Duane's retraction syndrome is the upshoot. So when the patient is trying to look up, adduct and look up, so you'll have an upshoot, or sometimes it may go downwards for the downshoot. So basically that is because of the slipping of the lateral rectus over the tight lateral rectus over the globe. So here you can see this patient. So she's trying to, then you can see the left eye, it's overshooting. So this is a classical upshoot in a Duane's retraction syndrome. You can see the narrowing of the palpebral aperture also, and widening of the aperture on abduction. So this is a classical type 1 Duane's with a upshoot. So you can see the upshoot here. It's very nicely seen there. We also need to do the forceps test, which Dr. Deepti has nicely highlighted, the force reduction, force generation, and we do something called the force degeneration test to demonstrate the abnormal lateral rectus innervation. Differential diagnosis is important because most common condition which is misdiagnosed with Duane's is the lateral rectus palsy. Many a times we get reference of the pediatrician telling that a 6-month-old baby is having a lateral rectus palsy, so it's an acute neurological condition. You please examine and diagnose. So most often it will be Duane's retraction syndrome only. Congenital lateral rectus palsy is very rare in a child. Most often it is a Duane's retraction syndrome. So you have to differentiate this condition from Duane's retraction syndrome. Also, the infantile esotropia is another condition which can be mistaken for a Duane's syndrome. So when to do a intervention means most of the times duant retraction syndrome does not need any intervention. So, but when to intervene will be only when you have a abnormal head posture and the patient is cosmetically worried about it, or if there is a strabismus in the primary posture. So these are the two indications. And when not to operate is very important, because when the eyes are straight and the patient is not having any abnormal head posture, it is best not to touch these patients, because you will end up with very serious post-operative problems. So what to achieve in strabismus correction is mainly to cosmesis. So mainly to correct the strabismus in the primary posture and eliminate the abnormal head posture. These two are the most important thing. And third thing probably we can achieve is the improvement of the binocular field of vision. We have always to remember here, we should never do a resection, means strengthening procedure of the lateral rectus. So if you resect the lateral rectus, because I've told you time and again, lateral rectus muscle is the muscle at fault. So whenever you try to strengthen the lateral rectus muscle, you will end up with serious problems. All the co-contraction, the globe retraction, the narrowing, palpebral aperture, widening of the aperture, everything will get worsened. So you should never touch the lateral rectus. You should never do a resection of the lateral rectus. The only procedure you can do on a lateral rectus is the resection, and that is weakening of the lateral rectus. And I also showed you the subshoot and downshoot. So this upshoot can be corrected with a simple procedure called as a Y-splitting of the lateral rectus. So I'll just show you a simple video here. So here you can see this lateral rectus. I'm trying to split the lateral rectus into two, and then tie the ends of the switches at the end of the muscle. And then I'll be splitting, you can see here in this picture. So we are splitting the lateral rectus into a Y shape. And one insertion comes here, the other insertion comes here. So thereby, you are preventing this globe from splitting again the lateral rectus. If you are not done a Y split, the globe will behave like this. If you are done a Y split, the globe will behave like this. Addition also prevent the lateral rectus muscle. So it's important to remove all those additions. You split the muscle and suture it right apart. So the globe doesn't split over the spine. We are doing a resection plus a Y split. So this will be the post-operative result when you do a surgery. So summarizing, Duane's retraction syndrome is an innervational abnormality of the lateral rectus, and we should never do a strengthening procedure on the lateral rectus. So this is very important point to remember. You should never do a strengthening procedure of the lateral rectus. Surgery is indicated only if there is an abnormal head posture in the primary position, or there is a strabismus in the primary position. If the eyes are straight and the binocular vision is good, best not to do anything. So I would like to skip this Brown's syndrome and fixes. So in conclusion, restrictive strabismus is not a difficult thing to tackle, and you should know when not to operate more important than when to operate. Thank you. I request comments from Dr. Kavita and Dr. Deepthi.
Very nice presentation, Dr. Arun. But still I have many, keep having doubts. I think that's the way to go about.
Yes.
Because formally, to be very honest, I have not been trained in squint. I've learned by seeing videos and...
that's very good, yeah.
Because earlier we were doing only cataract, and those days, no, we didn't have concept of fellowship as well. Whatever it was just cataract. So this article, these two articles which I read is thing is that Kraft's recommendation. Although we were being, we have read and time and again reinforced the point that lateral rectus not to be touched. But they have come out with this article where they're recommending about 3 mm resection. So if you want to do a ISO of about 30 prisms, probably that resection of 3 mm can be an additional benefit. Otherwise, we might have to think of doing medial rectus resection in the other eye. I don't know whether how successful.
Yeah, no, basically, I didn't want to confuse the postgraduates and the general ophthalmologists with that. Correct. So The take-home message should be not to test the
Yeah,
lateral rectus resections, so that we don't end up with complications. Dr. Deepti, any
There are
inputs?
2-3 points. One thing is which the normal amount of the recessions what we use with respect to Parkes table in case of our comitant squint doesn't apply here. So there is always the amount of recession has to be more than what is done for a normal patient. The second thing what with respect to PGs and fellows is this is Duane syndrome. Majority of the patients confuse that type 1 always has to be an esotropia because there is a lateral rectus abduction, abduction restriction. That is not so. You can have a type 1 with esotropia, with exotropia, despite having a lateral rectus restriction. So the way of surgery management remains the same with respect to this, just with respect to adding a bit of MR and then changing. But whatever said and done, I think each patient has to be individualized with respect to presence of restrictions, presence of ESO or exo, presence of upshift or downshift, and if there is any co-contractions. These are the 4 things which we have to see, and based on that an individualized treatment has to be done in all case of Duane's. No 2 Duane's is despite being type 1 itself, no 2 Duane's can be similar to one another, and the treatment management definitely has to be individualized.
Very good, very nicely summarized. I think we'll go to the next condition. See, whenever many a times you face this dilemma, the parents will come to you telling that the child has a squint, but when you see there is no squint at all, eyes are absolutely straight. So there are only 2 possibilities here. One is the child can be having an intermittent exotropia, or the child can be having accommodating esotropia. So in both these conditions, you will see that the eyes are absolutely straight when you examine. But when you carefully examine, there are 2 things important here. To diagnose an accommodative esotropy, you have to put an accommodative target and try to examine the child. And for intermittent exotropy, you have to ask the patient to look at a very far away object and then try to diagnose. So these 2 conditions are the conditions where parents will come with a history of squint, but you will not see any squint in a clinic. And to elaborate more about it, we have none other than Dr. Soumya. She is a consultant pediatric ophthalmologist at the Shankara Eye Hospital in Bangalore. And she has so many publications to her name also. And she'll be enlightening more about how to tackle these intermittent exotropies. Over to you, Dr. Soumya.
Thank you, Arun sir, for the opportunity. Very good morning, everybody. So the topic of discussion today would be when to intervene in intermittent exotropia. As Dr. Arun was just mentioning, that the parents come with a history of squinting noticed in the child and you don't notice anything. Carefully observe this child, that the child squints for a minute or a second and then blinks and then the eyes are back to normal. So this is what the condition of discussion today, that is the intermittent exotropia. So when do we intervene in exotropia?